All right, and here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where in the world you are. I'm Lisa Berkeley, the Peace Sector Lead of the Charter for Compassion, and today is our um, final episode, we could say, of Through the Lens of MLK, Understanding the Other from Racism to Sexism, with award-winning singer-songwriter Aliza Hava. And I'm so excited to have her here today. Before we jump into a little bit more of discussion, I just would like to tell you a little bit about her. And just to do a little bit of housekeeping as well, if you are with us live and you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box. And if you have any comments, type them into the chat comment, and we will be doing questions towards the end. And with that, let me then jump in and tell you a little bit about Aliza. Aliza Hava is an award-winning artist and songwriter who sings truth to power, evoking medicine for the soul. Her dynamic voice and driving rhythms, paired with a lifelong commitment to social change and spiritual growth, create a unique signature aesthetic. Her latest album, entitled Natural State, features 10 songs fusing folk, rock, pop, and R&B into thought-provoking, emotionally resonant themes spanning from personal transformation to love, heartbreak, and standing in one's own true power. The songs are rootsy yet refined, bringing to life a glimmering mosaic of the moments and movements that have shaped her life. Aliza's songs have been included in compilations and soundtrack with musical luminaries such as Annie Lennox, Amanda Palmer, and Ani DiFranco, and she's shared bills with world-class artists such as Dr. John, Richie Havens, Michael Franti, and more. Michael Franti, sorry about that, and more. With an inherent message of peace and universal love, Aliza's music embodies the power of music to heal the mind, body, and soul while staying true to the ongoing practice of reclaiming our natural state. I want to add here that one of Aliza's greatest, well, the way that I got to know her a number of years ago is she's been also very active in the peace movement. And she has this uncanny way of bridging social justice and compassion and the human spirit. It really is a healer in my opinion. So Aliza, thanks for being with us. Yeah, so I think we're gonna start off. Aliza put out a song about Martin Luther King, which we're gonna jump in and share with you. Do you wanna tell us a little bit about the song before we have it played for everyone, Aliza?
Sure, absolutely. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who's here today. And thank you so much for tuning in, and to Lisa and the Charter for Compassion for introducing and giving me such a warm welcome, and also inviting me to be here today. The music that I wrote for Martin Luther King was actually inspired by a number of events that took place throughout my life. When I was a young girl and I was in elementary school, my music teacher did an entire sequence with us, teaching us about Dr. King, and it was to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. And so we, as a choir, we ended up doing an entire play with music, talking about social justice and social change and Dr. King's life and his legacy. And so that made an imprint on me at a very early age. I was about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 years old when that happened. And I felt a very strong resonance with the work and the message. And interestingly enough, on a personal level, I was growing up in a neighborhood that was primarily Black and Jewish. So I had a lot of Black friends, and also, I had a strong Jewish background. So that was a very natural thing for me in my life to be part of that community, that mixed community. And as I got older, I started to understand more that there was a legacy of Black people and Jewish people having friendships and bonds. And so when I was in high school, my father was hired to write a book about a shared legacy between Dr. King and the Jewish people. And that book is, it was actually, he ghost wrote the book for a very prominent figure who, my dad was under NDA, but I'm not going to go there. The point is that I was part of, I saw my father going through the process of researching this book and really understanding more about the relationships, and even some of the speeches that were presented by Dr. King were written by people who were Jewish, and so there is that shared ethic. I think, people often, they look at Dr. King as this, he was obviously a leader, a moral leader, and a spiritual leader, but oftentimes I think it gets forgotten that a lot of the principles that he talked about were based on religion and based on the fact that he was a preacher. And he, he's really teaching the ethics of the Old Testament as seen through the lens of the New Testament. And so that was something that really made an impact on me, because I started to understand this bridge between the religions, that there's such a common thread that's being woven through the teachings of these various religions. And anyway, continuing on, eventually I was asked as I got older and became a professional musician, I was asked to compose a song about Dr. King for a high school educational curriculum to teach young people about Dr. King's life, his message, and his legacy. And the theory behind this project was that young people have a hard time remembering facts that they study. So if you set it to music and it's a song, it's easier to remember. So I was specifically tasked with putting lyrics into the song that had factual historical information so that when people listened to it, they would remember dates, locations, people. And so that's why the song itself has a lot of that detail in it. And so, yeah, that ended up becoming part of several educational curriculums. Teachers have used it in schools as a discussion tool to get high school students talking about Dr. King's life. And I've even worked with the Charter for Compassion to bring it into high school here in Scotts Valley, where I'm currently based. And we did a lyrical analysis, and one of the students said, wow, I didn't know that Dr. King was married, and this is a senior in high school. So it's very interesting to see how these teachings and the historical legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has kind of faded a bit than it maybe was, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, but it's still such an important message, especially now as we see that many millennials don't really connect to faith as much. I think that I've heard through the grapevine that there is a faith crisis in America, and being someone who grew up exposed to many different kinds of people and religions and spiritual perspectives, that kind of hits me in an interesting way, because faith is actually what got me through some very difficult and painful times in my life. So that's why I wanted to, just bring that up as, this term sacred activism. I think that that's essentially what Dr. King was a sacred activist.
Oh, I love that. All right, before we jump into more about sacred activism, let's go ahead and we've got Susan Salil working with us behind the scenes. Thank you, Susan, who's gonna load up the video, because I think you're speaking about such an important space about the intersection of activism and spirituality. All right,
I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Martin Luther King was a preacher man. He fought the system and the Ku Klux Klan. Served his time down in Birmingham. Fighting all his life, he never raised a hand. August 28th, 1963, he said, I have a dream for equality, for brotherhood and justice for you and me. This ain't a Jim Crow society. The civil rights movement was a type of revolution. Open up our minds to conscious evolution so we could pave a way to a common solution. Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream. Dr. King lived a life of meaning. He wanted to prove he wasn't only dreaming. He'd come for those who'd gone astray, to teach that there's a better way. He said, let the golden rule be the rule of thumb, to love each other, everyone, so we can win the war on hate before we find it's too late. Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream. Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream. He said, unity is the great need of the hour. So when we come together, we will surely have the power. Unity is the great need of the hour. So when we come together, we will surely have the power. It's a long road ahead, we got work to do for all oppressed people, Muslim or Jew, rich, poor, black or white. We need to walk the path to light. Coretta Scott King was his foundation, a loving wife who helped a man rock a nation. So we sing it, celebration, Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream. Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther, oh, Dr.
Mm. Mm. Wow, what a powerful song! And you know, I've listened to it on YouTube, and it does come through. Unfortunately, I think it came through a little tinny, but definitely the message was there. So I really encourage everyone to go check it out on YouTube. It's such a powerful song. Wow, thank you, Aliza, for that. Because what I appreciate about it is it takes the past and makes it very relevant for today, and certainly in light of you know, the whole Black Lives Matter coming back. You know, you mentioned beforehand talking about sacred activism, and I think that that's a very important topic to discuss in relationship to today's world, where there's so much turmoil. And you know, I was at a meeting the other day with a number of council members and mayors in the state of California. And somebody made the comment, you know, there's so many fires everywhere. It's like, where do you start? Or which fire do you choose to focus on? And I think the concept of sacred activism is can be a guiding principle in working against all of these isms, from sexism to racism, etc. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? How that's played in your life?
In terms of how sacred activism has filtered in to my work.
How it's gone into your work, but I'm realizing maybe we should define the term a little bit too, so that people, because I don't think it's such a common term. So let's talk about that.
Okay, well, I guess there are different perspectives on what sacred activism might mean to different people. In the New Age movement, it might have one meaning. I tend to put my own slant on it because of the way that I look at my commitment to social change. When I think about all the work, like you said, all the fires that need to be put out and all the work that has to be done to fix the planet, so to speak, it takes me to this story, this kind of Old Testament story talking about this light unto the nations, to be a light unto the nations. And that's a very specific thing for the Jewish faith and the Jewish people, to be a light unto the nations. But there's also something else that's attached to that, which is a Hebrew phrase called tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. And so as a path, as a spiritual path, the determination and the choice to help repair the world is actually built on a foundation of this idea of spiritual principles. And I say spiritual principles instead of religious principles because religion and spirituality have different connotations. And, religion for me invokes a ideology that could potentially be dogmatic, patriarchal, and constricted, where spirituality, on the other hand, for me personally in my path, it's more fluid, it's more open and embracing, and it's also more of a path of discovery, a discovery of self, and also a discovery of personal relationship with God, which is different for every single person. Right? So there's nobody standing over me with a hammer saying, you have to believe in this God this way and do these things in order to be deemed, legit lover of God. I take much more of like the Hafiz path, which is to be in love with God and to see God as a friend. So that's what I mean in terms of defining, for me, the difference between religion and spirituality. So coming from this place, sacred activism and the relationship to tikkun olam, which again means to repair the world, for me, it's kind of an inherent part of life. If you're someone who is an empathetic person and who can feel the pain of others, who could see the pain of others, who has felt deep pain and doesn't want other people to feel that, whatever it is that makes you committed to changing the world around you, whatever that motivation is, there's a connection between myself and the other, right? It's like, sure, I want the world to be great because I want to live in a great world, right? But if other people are suffering, what can I do to alleviate that suffering? And what shape does that take? So a few days ago, you had Todd Mack from Music in Common on, and Todd, I know Todd for many years, and he's been working with young people doing projects through music to help heal the divides, to build bridges and relationships through the healing power of music. It's a very powerful tool. And, while I'm talking about that, I'll just drop another little, special nugget in there, which is that, if you've ever thought about, maybe you haven't thought about this, but if you have, this is something that I'm very passionate about. It's like all the different faiths use music as a form of prayer. If you look at every single religion, whether it's chanting or hymns or gospel, hymns or gospel, obviously, but there's different forms of music and singing that are used to praise. And the reason for that is because it's said in the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, that music is the one thing in the world that goes straight to God, because it's like a straight channel. It's a straight channel to the divine. So that's why it has such a powerful healing capacity. Anyhow, that sorry.
You're good. Good.
Kind of going into my my teacher mode over here, but the point is that these are the things that have influenced me as an artist and have made me understand the power of music and why that commitment to repairing the world is a very inherent part of just being alive. It's if you're separate, if you think of us as we're separate, like I'm separate from the people over there and they're separate from me and they're different. And, you know, there's a dichotomy and a duality there that is actually perpetuating this myth of separation, which perpetuates the reality of the other. You know, this person's different than me and I don't like the way they do that. And because of that, I feel entitled to hurt them or hate them. And this is what the whole social justice movement is about. It's about eradicating hatred, eradicating racism. You know, this whole anti-racism movement is amazing that it's so it's become so prolific and proliferated around the world now, especially, you know, in this last year. It's become a huge part of the fabric of the global conversation, which is amazing. Sad that it's, you know, still happening after these hundreds of years, but at the same time, it means that like the universe is kind of working harder to heal itself, and it's becoming more and more part of the mainstream fabric of society. Yeah, I could go on, but I should like.
Yeah, no, you're making me think about so many things. You know, when we're talking about sacred activism, and you're going through so much of the Jewish roots piece, I'm reminded of a few things. One, how when we're working, the piece of sacred activism that I love is the piece that's also connected with self-care and recognizing how relevant it is to care for yourself and recognize what I don't remember the phrase in Hebrew, but the translation is if you save one life, you've saved the world. And that in keeping things kind of, we don't have to make a huge step. Like one little thing, as long as we're also doing self-care, makes a huge difference. And then, so I have that kind of going in my mind. And I'm also thinking then about what you're just speaking about, the self and other, and how by seeing the other, all of these isms step in, the sexism, the racism, even terrorism, you know, it's this fear of other, and how, it's like, how do we bridge that? How do we work with that? What kind of spiritual practices or musical practices, or like you're saying, you know, the intersection of the two is really an opportunity to help us to heal. So just I'm thinking, I'm kind of vibing, if you will, no pun intended, on the music piece, down those two separate roads. And I'm also then thinking about your most recent song, Behind These Eyes, which I want to share with everyone. I think we'll close out with that. But can you tell us a little bit about this? And it's also up for an award too, is my understanding.
Sure. Thanks for asking about this particular song. So a few years ago, I started working with a dear friend of mine who's a songwriter, and we decided to collaborate on a song that I had been working on, but it wasn't quite finished. And I usually write all my songs myself, but in this particular case, I wanted to see what it would be like to work with this person. His name is Alan Roy Scott, and he spent several decades of his life doing a project called Music Bridges, which brought musicians together in different conflict regions to write songs together and to work stuff out through the music and through the songwriting process. So Alan and I have been friends for quite some time, and I thought, you know, this would be a great song to work on with him, because I felt that the theme, you know, the lyrics that came to me were, I will try to see things from your side. What's the path I would choose if I walked in your shoes? We come from different places and have seen thousands of faces. I wonder what lies behind your eyes. And that's the chorus of the song. And, you know, one of the reasons why social activism is considered work is because these things don't necessarily come easy to us. It's easy to just judge, and it's easy to just be whatever, conditioned by society. And it's harder to have this self-awareness and to want to break out of the ways that we've been conditioned to change the way we think and to change our perspectives. And that's why this, this work is it's so crucial, but it's also very self-reflective. And like you were saying earlier, that self-care piece is huge, because if we ignore that, if we ignore what's happening inside of us, we might not be conscious of what we're actually creating in the world, right? Because the world, in many ways, I mean, a lot of scientists and metaphysicians talk about this. It's it's a projection of what's going on within us, right? So if we're not tending to that inner self and that piece of the psyche that's broken, that collective piece of the psyche that's wounded, we're going to continue to manifest it in the external world. So the work is actually being self-reflective. The work is saying, like, I refuse to think this way. I'm told that I should think this way. I'm told that I should feel this way, and I'm going to break that cycle. One of the quotes in the Martin Luther King video, it says, it's not just about refusing to shoot someone. It's also about refusing to hate him, to hate that person, right? So there's an internal psychological choice that we have to make to overcome prejudice. And speaking of that phrase, overcoming prejudice, when the whole anti-racism movement really blew up this past year, I thought to myself, wow, I really wish that they were, promoting this idea of overcoming prejudice rather than being anti-racist. Because again, there's a dichotomy there. When you're anti, you're against something, you're pushing up against something bad. It's like good and evil, light and dark. It's love and hate, and these are very polarizing things. So when you look at things in terms of being polarized, they continue to be polarized.
Go ahead.
Oh, but when you're thinking of it in terms of like healing from something or overcoming a challenge, it's different, because it invokes a sense of, there's a transformational process that I'm going through. So in this case, overcoming prejudice, which is the term I prefer to use, there's like a self-reflective analysis, like an intake of our own prejudices that we're raised with in this society, that we have to do that kind of inner reflection on, and then say, wow, do I really believe this? Why do I believe this? Is this true? Right? I think there's a self woman who teaches that. I don't know her name, but
who does the work, right? It's called, actually, that's the name of her process, is the work. So, and one of the key questions is, how do I know it's true? Right on. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think that there's a big part of the work that has to do with our own personal perspectives, not just being out in the world and organizing and marching and speaking out. A lot of the work, which I've realized over 10, 15 years of being an activist and working in different places in the world and different movements, I've come to realize what, some people have been telling me all along. It's like, it has to start with you. You have to do the work within yourself if you're going to truly have a profound ripple effect in the world. It's like, put your own mask on first, So, yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that, when we're talking about this, and as I'm reflecting on what you're saying, and also where we are and how we move forward, that the inner work is so important to do, and how do we overcome our own, insecurities and fear. And I think the next step that people sometimes run away from in this anti-movement, and I love how you phrase that, calling it overcoming rather than anti, because as soon as there's the anti, you're going to be looking for, well, I'm not that as well. And so I think that when very often, especially white people, wind up saying, well, I'm not racist. I have friends of all different colors, without looking, without, to your point. So you're saying, look at where does it come from? But then it can trigger emotions of like fear or guilt or shame. And that's really where the work needs to occur, is being comfortable staying in that place and overcoming it. So I really appreciate how you're framing that. Yeah, I'm just sort of absorbing what you're saying.
Well, I just want to say, that came from a mentor of mine named Doug Rue. When I was in college, he was a local Baha'i. He was practicing Baha'i, and I'd never heard of Baha'i, so I learned about it through him. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Baha'i is essentially, it is a religion that encompasses the belief that all of the prophets were part of an evolving consciousness that ultimately led to the appearance of Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet that brought down the Baha'i faith. And he and I became friends. Obviously, I've been interested in theology for most of my life, so we had lots of beautiful discussions. And he was the one who started my thinking about overcoming prejudice, because he had created an educational program. Again, he was a teacher, called Overcoming Prejudice, to do these processes with younger kids. And I thought that was just fascinating. And we had lots of wonderful discussions. So I really want to honor him by saying that that's where I learned about that perspective. And he's no longer with us in this world, but I'm sure that he would love to be part of this conversation if he were here, because he's a very dear, giving human being who is really committed to this work.
Well, so when you mentioned Baha'i, I think I'm reminded of the Baha'i Gardens. And I lived, unfortunately, you and I missed each other in our time spent in Israel, Palestine. But I bring up Israel, Palestine because we both had the experience of living there and working within the peacemaking arena. And one of the things that I struggled with was one, there are all these Americans who have an opinion about what's going on. And sometimes that's a real challenge, because it's really not until you're on the ground and engaging with both people on both sides to suddenly understand the depth and the complexity, not just culturally, spiritually, culturally, personally. You've got two nations living with tremendous PTSD. And when we talk about how do we overcome the isms and the fear of the other, this is sort of the I feel like my time there, I walked away with more questions. Maybe I went in thinking I had some understanding, but ultimately I walked out with more questions and more pain as far as seeing where everybody was. And that when in being in that environment, how being so focused on what keeps us separate than what unifies, and while respecting the perspective of the other, can really keep you stuck in well, quite frankly, in this case, in war. And I'm curious as to how your experience living there, because like I said, I don't really know a whole lot about your experience there. We crossed. So how that affected your, how should I say this, your understanding of other or lack of other, unity, healing of society.
That's an excellent and also very complicated question. And I think you're absolutely right. There's so many people who have opinions, political opinions, and kind of like a self-righteous opinion around, the dynamics in the Middle East. I lived there for 8 years on and off, splitting time between the States and Jerusalem. And I was involved with many different projects. I actually represented, I was working with the United Nations Culture of Peace Initiative as a Middle East regional coordinator for about, it was almost 7 years, 6 years that I was in that position. And so part of my work was to, help create projects and, network people together, build bridges, and just be a presence, promoting the culture of peace in that region. And so, I came there with a very idealistic perspective. We are all one, and let's heal the world. I was very on fire, fresh out of college, and also I'd kind of grown up in a war zone, to be honest with you. I grew up in a very violent home, and with a lot of post-traumatic stress from the Holocaust. I grew up as a child of second generation Holocaust survivors and third generation from my grandparents. And so I really understood this, violence, the perpetuation of violence, and how that is detrimental to the future of humanity, right? As a whole, just like high level, we have to stop hurting each other, period. I mean, that's just basic, right? But when it gets down to people who are constantly in a state of PTSD, like you said, who are not willing to do the work, not willing to be self-reflective, and also there are also political forces at play that are on both sides, definitely on both sides, political forces at play that have a stake in maintaining this this us and them, this fire. And we could talk about the political war machine. We could talk about the military industrial complex. We could talk about Hitler and the Grand Mufti and their pact to exterminate the Jews after World War II ended. I mean, there's so many different facets. And we could talk about, this ultra right-wing Orthodox belief that the Palestinians are of a certain evil race that need to be exterminated from the world. I mean, what you've got on both sides are these very extreme perspectives that are locked in. Like, people are not willing to look at the way they're thinking because they believe they're right. And when you're fixed like that, when you have that kind of fixed perspective, it's very hard to work with that. And so it's so important, I think. And again, I want to talk about the difference between religion and spirituality from my personal perspective, which is that religion is very dogmatic. It's very like hard. This is what you have to think. This is what you have to feel. If you don't do it like this, you're bad. That kind of brainwashing, I think, is extremely dangerous and extremely toxic. And obviously we see that and the way that it's played out with the violence around the world, not just in that region, but in other regions. And also, on the other side for me, like, I'm the spiritual side, the way that I relate to life is by being open, having the internal, making that internal decision that, like, I'm going to consider that I might be wrong. I'm going to consider that my way of thinking might be wrong. And I'm going to suspend my judgment. I'm going to suspend my way of thinking, and I'm going to allow myself to experience what is the other person going through, or what is that other culture? Why are they like that? To help me understand, so that there's less of that that firm judgment of, they're bad, I'm good. Yes, whatever that dynamic is that makes people stay in conflict. So I think that what I learned while living there is that until those two extreme polarized ways of thinking are softened, it's going to be very, very difficult to have any kind of genuine coexistence and genuine healing. And it really, it's frightening because it filters down into the education of young people. One of the very interesting things that happened while I was living there, which, I consider it kind of like a miracle story, is that Obama had just gotten elected. It was 2008, and they were sending an envoy, a Middle East, envoy, Senator George Mitchell, to try and, create a new Middle East peace agreement. And, you know, I was saying to some of my colleagues, you know, any peace agreement that they create is going to be completely useless unless they start teaching peace in all of the schools. Because if you keep brainwashing kids to hate each other, you know, the Palestinians are bloodthirsty and the Jews are evil, and, you know, this is what's being taught in certain schools. And, you know, as long as that was allowed to continue in the school system, you're going to keep breeding hate, because it really does start at a very young age. You know, the reason why we do these workshops with young people is to help them catch it before it becomes solidified in their mind, right? Because kids aren't born racist. Kids aren't born, you know, hating. I mean, yeah, some kids have natural inclinations towards bullying. That's for sure. Some kids are more sensitive than others. But, you know, a lot of that also has to go with what's going on in the home, right? What's going on in the home? Why is this kid more aggressive? Why is this kid more, you know, there's a personality, there's a nature nurture component to that as well. But that being said, you still have the opportunity as a teacher at a young age to influence young people, as a parent, as a babysitter, as anybody who is in a leadership position. When you're around kids, you are influencing that child's thinking. Words are powerful, attitudes are powerful, and kids look up to the people who raise them. So they're going to adopt those beliefs in some way or another, even if they don't necessarily adopt it for life. There are unconscious attitudes and belief systems that we are picking up on, that are somehow filtering through our brains, and that is affecting how we view the world and how we view each other, right? So again, getting back to the Middle East, I said to my colleague, they have to have a mandatory peace education curriculum, which isn't just about history, but it's also about social emotional learning, right? It has to be, how do you make space for someone who's going through something that is completely polar to what you're experiencing, right? How do we create peace in a region that is completely polarized? You have to teach people how to make space for the other. So not long after I had that conversation, I was invited to sing at a pub in Jerusalem. It was like a small little bar, really cute, smoky cafe vibe. And I was singing, and this African-American guy walks into the room in this smoking hot suit. And you very rarely see anything like that in Jerusalem, because nobody wears a suit unless they're like an Orthodox Jew, you know, like people are just hanging out, you know, in regular clothes. So I was like, who's that guy? You know, I was like, it's a nice suit, you know? So he sits at the bar and he's listening to the music, and, you know, I was like, okay, what should I play now? So I was like, you know, I'm going to play Killing Me Softly, the cover, you know, by Roberta Flack, right? So I start singing the song, I finish my set, I get off stage, and something tells me I need to connect with this person. It's just a feeling that I had. And so I was walking past the bar, and I kind of looked over at him, and he reached out and he put out his hand and he said, I just want to thank you for singing that song, because I was actually thinking, man, I wish she would sing that song, Killing Me Softly. He actually thought it in his mind. Wow. Because I had said, you know, are there any requests? And nobody had said anything. So I just played Killing Me Softly. So he told me that he had thought it in his mind, but he was too shy to say it, right? So I was like, that's crazy. How did that happen? So we ended up having a conversation, and he said, I really like your other songs too. Maybe you could send them to me. He gives me his card. I see he works for the State Department. Turns out he's George Mitchell's personal assistant, on having the night off during this, you know, 10-day tour of the Middle East. And so we ended up hanging out for several hours, and I shared with him my vision for mandatory peace education. That night, he went back and had a conversation with George Mitchell based on that conversation. And even though all those talks fell apart, he came back to Jerusalem a few months later, and he told me that he had actually had a personal conversation with Senator Mitchell about this very idea, and that he had found it to be extremely valuable and something to really take into consideration. So somehow it filtered through the I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of a miracle. Like, how did I go from having a conversation with someone one day to next day having the ear of Senator Mitchell through his assistant, who I met at the bar because I played the song that he was singing, that he was thinking about. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of like the Jerusalem magic, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the Jerusalem magic, and I think that there's something too about just a reminder of like how spirit can potentially orchestrate things. And I know when we had our pre-call, we didn't talk at all about jumping into the Israel-Palestine dynamic. So thank you for going with me in this arena. But part of what made me bring it up is because when we're talking about the complexities that we face when we're faced with all of these isms and doing the inner work of overcoming sexism, racism, inner terrorism, right? All of these shadow sides of our personality rooted in fear and anger, and that don't even come necessarily from our own heart and well-being. You know, this is kind of the perfect tinderbox of all of those things. And when you talk about peace education, that's, I think, couldn't agree with you more. And recognizing that globally, I think almost at this point, especially in light of COVID, we've got, you know, we're a let's say nation, but we're actually a world living in with some degree of PTSD at this point. And so how do we heal it? And how do we help prepare it? And in this conversation, we've touched on a number of things. We've touched on the role of music in it. We've talked about peace education. We've talked about the need for self-awareness and self-care in this process of addressing the isms, and self-care meaning both the self-reflection and inner work, and also taking time. Sometimes we need to take a break. And so we've got about 10 minutes or so left. So I want to talk a little bit more about giving yourself, you know, each person giving themselves permission to say like, okay, I need a break. This, we're sort of circling back to this sacred activism piece. And I know that you and I have had a number of conversations around this. Would you like to talk about that? Would you like to share about some of that? As far as,
Can you ask the question more specifically?
so I'll speak first about myself, and maybe we'll go from there. That there's sometimes we're watching the media, we're watching, or we're in another country, or we're in the middle of conflict, whether it be a collective conflict, or maybe it's even conflict within our own communities or relationships. And sometimes we need to say, okay, stop, I'm going to put a pause here, right? And then when we get into act, and so in the personal level, we maybe take a time out from a loved one or friend or whatever. But then what does that look like on the collective level? And so when if we're in activism mode, or we feel called to make a difference in the world, we can get so caught up in media, social media, conversations, that it becomes overwhelming for our nervous system, where it leads us to brain fog, to burnout, to exhaustion, to our own sense of an inability to process negative emotions. And then therefore we're contributing to part of the problem. And so I know for myself, I'm as an empath and as somebody who is deeply committed to making the world better in whatever way I can, I'm having to say, okay, I need to turn off the TV today. I need to go for a walk. I need to take a few steps back. So I guess really what I'm asking you is, what are you doing to do self-care? Because I think also in music, singing, and songwriting, you need to be in a space where you feel connected with yourself. How do you do it? Is that a more clear question? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is something that I had to work on for a very long time, because I I have a personality where I'm a kind of go, 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 go kind of person until I drop, you know, and that's been my way for so much of my life. It's like I take on a lot of responsibilities and I juggle a lot of balls. And it wasn't until I met my husband, who is completely opposite of me, that I really got to understand how living at that pace was unhealthy for me and my nervous system. Um, you know, he's a wonderful mirror, and he's also someone who is very he's very empathic. So, you know, seeing how my go, 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 go personality was having an impact on him, that mirror was like, wow, I got to slow down. I got to slow down. This is not healthy for my marriage, right? Because I'm like, if I was single, I'd be like, I'm always on, you know, whether it's a project over here or a record I'm recording over here, or, you know, travel. So really, I had to learn through my relationship that it was important for me to slow down. And in terms of, and I'm very grateful to him for helping me learn that. In terms of media and social media and the news and the world, you know, I've come to have, I think, a more balanced perspective on it because, you know, over the last 4 years, you know, being glued to the phone and what crazy thing is going to happen next, you know, it is very nerve-wracking and very toxic, I think, to be addicted to social media. And I think that it's very clear for anyone who is constantly involved in watching the news. And, you know, it is not healthy. And it's actually more intense and volatile here in the United States than anywhere else that I know of. I mean, I think in Canada, the media is very different. Of course, they report the news, but the sensationalism and the negativity and the constant barrage of hype and inflammatory statements and talk shows, and you know, it's very hard to get a really clear, balanced perspective from the media in the United States. If you live in another part of the world, that might be different, but it's very hard to get real, consistent, you know, just stable truth and news. So I basically just stopped watching the news. And I was never much for TV anyway, but I don't watch the news. I get my news from, I filter it through the lens of my very balanced husband. So we discuss the news and we discuss politics, but we discuss it in a setting where we try to be very conscious of how we talk about it, because it's very easy to get inflamed and it's very easy to get upset. And it's like when the insurrection happened in the Capitol. I mean, I saw that in my news feed and I freaked out and I was like, oh my God, there's going to be a civil war. I knew it. And I started freaking out. He's like, yeah, you need to calm down. Okay. Again, having that balancing act is a blessing, but you know, there was a part of me that instantly reacted to the fear of, you know, I've been feeling that there's a civil war coming. I've been nervous. Thank God it didn't happen. You know, I mean, there were moments when even the news was, you know, everybody was writing articles. Are we on the brink of a civil war? It's like, it's almost like they wanted a civil war so they'd have something to write about, you know? So it's all about really just remembering this is a machine. This media is a machine, and they are actually making money. The more inflamed you get and the more you stay glued and addicted to the toxicity and the negativity, they're making money. And the same thing with social media. Because everybody knows, if you watch The Social Dilemma, or even if you've been paying attention to any of the CEOs of social media, they create these apps to make us addicted. I mean, look at TikTok for kids, right? I mean, it's for everybody, but it's really grown with young people. These are like 15-second clips, and it's like the brain is like getting some dopamine hits every time somebody, likes your post or comments. Ding, 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 ding. There's a dopamine hit that you're getting. So you're staying completely attached to this intentionally created addictive machine. And again, it's about having this perspective and taking a step back and realizing, like, I'm being used by these social media giants, right? And I'm not going to allow that to happen, right? It's making that conscious choice and then saying, I'm going to use it as a tool, but not become addicted to it, because it's designed to addict you. I mean, there's a book called Hooked by Nir Eyal, and the whole book is about how these apps are created intentionally to make you addicted to them, so that you keep coming back, you keep putting your stuff up there, you keep paying that subscription fee, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so how do I, long story short, because I don't really know how to tell a short story, I try to monitor my time. I don't watch the news. Thank God I have a partner who I discuss important politics with in conscious settings, so we're not reactive and inflammatory. And I go for a lot of walks in nature. Very fortunate to live in a beautiful area that has nature. I live in the woods, so I go for a lot of walks. And I try to meditate. I don't always meditate, but I try. I think it's very important. And I think that if I was able to get into a deeper practice, it would probably have much more significant benefits. So I am an advocate for meditation, absolutely, because I know that it's very powerful.
I'm listening to you and I'm here thinking about everything that you're doing around helping the nervous system and to become calmer and to be more open. And again, I'm sort of bringing us back because we're at the end of the hour now. So, but everything you're talking about, when we talk about understanding the isms and the other, is we have to be able to not be charged and in a place of fear. Our nervous systems have to be calm. We have to be able to be reflective. And the only way to really do that is to do all of the practices that you're talking about, so that we can stay open and in our heart and present in our body. And so, I invite everyone to, I'm going to ask Aliza to share her video, and then we're going to do a quick wrap up after that. So, I think as we listen to this video, which is just so phenomenally beautiful, I just invite everyone to open your own heart and listen with us.
Thanks, Lisa. Oops.
Lately, we only disagree, but there's something you should know about me. I don't cave in easily, no matter what you say to me. And I will try to see things from your side. What's the path I would choose if I walked in your shoes? We come from different places, seen thousands of faces. I wonder what lies behind your Maybe we can speak our minds without getting angry, without all the lies. It seems like we don't have the time to sit around in silence or point fingers at the blind. And I will try to see things from your side. What's the path I would choose if I walked in your shoes? We come from different places, seen thousands of faces. I wonder what lies behind your eyes, behind your eyes. Our sight's been blurred by the lines of division. It's the human condition. So will you fight or use your vision? Time to make a decision. Behind your eyes, behind your eyes, behind your eyes, behind your
Wow. Wow. So stunning. It's so, so stunning. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us and with the world. And I'm going to just put on the screen. Before-
Sorry, I don't know what again. Hold on a second. Sorry. Awkward.
Before I put on the screen your contact information, any other last words you want to share?
I just wanted to thank you again for having me and thank the Charter for Compassion for doing such incredible and important work over the years. I've been part of the community, here and there over the past 5 years for the Charter for Compassion. And I think that, the world definitely needs more love and more empathy. And I also think it's very important to have, a balance between justice and peace. I think that there needs to be that that strong, no justice, no peace component. So balancing compassion with action that is rooted in really, changing the world.
Well, you are definitely a walking example of that. And so I really am grateful for you for being here with us today, for sharing your music, for sharing your wisdom, your life experiences. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So grateful. And on that note, here you should see, I hope, a full screen here, I hope, of where the best way to contact Aliza. Hold on a second. There we go. All right, so you can learn more at Aliza at alizahava.com. Hope you can join and learn more about her, and I hope that you will continue to learn more about what's going on at the Charter at charterforcompassion.org. thank you everyone for being with us, and we wish you a beautiful rest of the day. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot one other thing. You can learn more and listen to more of Aliza's music on YouTube. Aliza, do you want to share anything with us? Best way to find you on YouTube, or listen to that song directly, download it?
I'm going to put my YouTube channel here in the chat box, so you'll find that music video on the homepage.
All right, terrific. And then if somebody goes to YouTube and searches your name, I'm sure they will find the channel that way. Is that correct?
Yes, you could just put my name in there and you'll see it.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you, Louise, for the comments. I'm checking out your website now. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Oops, sorry for the jumping around of the slides. We're having some tech issues today. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.